Hello, and welcome to this edition of the Eric Miscoll Show. I am Eric Miscoll with EMS Now, and we are here today to do another update on the material supply chain. We've done a series of these over the years, and it's been a while, so we thought it would be appropriate. Before I introduce our guests, let me do some quick housekeeping issues. As always, I am joined by my beautiful co-host, Phil Stoten from Australia. For anybody live on this webinar, you are muted and will remain so for the duration of the webinar. If you wish to pose a question to the panel, we invite you to do so using the question tab at the bottom of the screen. And as always, this is being recorded and will be rebroadcast on EMS Now next week. So please share it with all your friends and family. Material supply chain. Let me introduce our guests first. We're fortunate today to have two first-time guests on this show. We have Mike Lucia, who is the Director of Global Supply Chains with Benchmark. Benchmark, of course, is a global EMS company. And Jeff Ray, who's the Vice President, Corporate Product Management and Supplier Marketing with TTI. TTI, of course, is a global distributor. We thought that this would be a good way to lend some balance to the discussion, having both the distributor and an EMS company speaking about the issues and giving us an update. So Mike and Jeff, welcome. Thank you both for agreeing to do this today. Since you're both new on the show, I'm going to ask you each to take a minute or two and introduce yourselves to our audience, and we'll do it alphabetically. So Mike, let me begin with you.
Oh, we'll go by last name. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Michael Lucia here from Benchmark. As you mentioned, Benchmark is a global electronic manufacturing services company. We operate in many different segments across the globe, including aerospace, defense, complex industrial, medical, semi-cap, and telecom and compute. Full service turnkey in a number of different geographies around the world. Me personally, I work as the Director of Global Supply Chain Solutions for Benchmark. And because of that, I have the opportunity to work with both new and existing customers on some of their most complex supply chain challenges that they're having and help them set up and architect their supply chains so it produces the most value for them.
Excellent. Thank you. Jeff?
Great. Hey, thank you. I'm Jeff Ray. I work at TTI Incorporated, a global specialist in IP&E products, also moving into discrete semiconductors. I've been here for 16 years, primarily responsible for our asset management and supplier marketing for passive components and discrete semiconductors. Recently, I've been promoted to Senior Vice President of our global strategic accounts, many of which are EMS customers. So really looking forward to the discussions today, and hopefully I'll be able to give some points of view from a historical view, from a product management standpoint, and maybe some early impressions from a global strategic role. So thank you for having me. Excellent.
Thank you for that. Well, let's begin kind of big picture. Actually, I've been asking people lately, is the crisis over, right? These last few years have been huge and disruptive in many ways. And a lot of that's been felt by EMS companies, in the material side. So how would you assess the current state of the material supply chain for EMS? And Mike, let me begin with you, sir.
Yeah, I mean, to sum it up, if I could give it to you in one sentence, I would say overall things are stabilizing, yet there remain pockets of constraints depending on your industry and your product line specifically. Mm-hmm. Is the crisis over? That's a very individual question. Even for an EMS company, it's difficult to answer because we service so many different customers around the globe, and some of them still have some big supply chain challenges that we're working on with them. So it's a very individual question that I would have to ask each customer, mm-hmm. and I think you would get a variety of answers on that due to those pockets of constraint that I mentioned. But overall, we see the situation stabilizing, and by that I mean in terms of lead times on products, they're stabilizing. That's key for one big reason in that it allows you to go back to the basics of material planning and purchasing things at lead time. When lead times are moving from 8 to 16 to 52 to 96 to we don't know when, and doing that quickly, it doesn't matter how good your planning process is. It's hard to catch up. to a moving target. So we're glad to see that's behind us, and lead times are stabilized. I wouldn't say they're back to where they were before the crisis, but stabilization is key. And we see similar effects in pricing, and as you go into different commodities, maybe there's even some relief there.
Any particular areas of devices or industries that are still suffering more than others?
If you look a little bit more closely, I would say on the semiconductor and chip side, that's where we see the majority of those pocketed constraints. Memory devices have freed up significantly in both terms of lead times and pricing. I think there's a bit of an oversupply to the market at the moment. We saw, if you look at more into the actual raw material side, things like steel were priced quite high, maybe 18, 20 months ago, and that's come down. However, the trend is starting to come back, which sort of follows most commodities and energy prices. It's kind of followed a similar pattern, starting to creep back up. One area where we've seen inflation take hold more than others is probably on things like interconnects and cables. These use a lot of copper. They have a lot of raw material in them, and additionally, suppliers cite rising labor costs as a driver.
Excellent.
Jeff, what's it look like from the other side of the table?
Well, it's a great question. So for us here at TTI, the power semiconductor market still remains tight. While analog and discrete, particularly diode products are improving, microcontrollers and those products are going to be problematic all the way through 2023 and likely through 2024. For TTI, we'd probably categorize our products a little bit along your questions around, commercial grade products versus automotive grade products. You're looking at capacitors, resistors, and then where we are with ruggedized or harsh environment products, particularly supporting low Earth orbit satellites through military applications. That segment is particularly robust these days, and again, through 2023 and likely 2024 will remain very heated. Products specifically that are improving, certainly circuit protection, frequency. Michael mentioned memory. We're not in the memory business, but there's clear evidence of improvement there. While magnetics are getting better, kind of inductors are, but maybe not so much when you get into ferrites and transformer type products. But overall, I would say the compliance products for magnetics are generally improving. As we mentioned, diodes and suppression products are improving, but the transistors, whether it's IGBTs or MOSFETs, while getting better, they're far from good. And I would, again, put guidance on those types of products all the way through this calendar year and likely through the first half of next calendar year. Michael mentioned a little bit about connectors and electromechanical products. There were kind of two schools of thought going into COVID relative to lead time. Most connector manufacturers viewed COVID more as a bubble as opposed to a market trend. And as such, they were a little bit more conservative on the extension of their lead times, which is the number one driver of all the order books and order management practices. You just simply can't have that equation without lead time being a key component of that overall equation. So while the passive suppliers are now starting to deliver a little bit better than stated lead times, and they are reducing, the connector and EMS suppliers are now starting to deliver to the stated lead times, which is still an improvement over what we've seen over the last couple of years. So I guess the last thing that would lead to is the question is, well, if lead times are getting better and product is a little bit more available, what will that mean from a pricing standpoint? And so from a cost point of view, certainly the lower lead times will drive lower costs, lower resales out in the market. In some cases, they'll be a little bit more pronounced than others. And again, you get back into the more commercially available commoditized products in the resistor chip and MLCC world. You probably see some downward pressures on pricing there, particularly, again, in capacitors and inductors as well, but not so much with connectors. And one of the reasons for connectors And this will permeate over also into some other products like aluminum capacitors, as an example. Products that have a high content from a labor standpoint or consume a lot of energy in the manufacturing process, I think you're going to continue to see price increases throughout the back half of 2023 and 2024. Mm-hmm. So the overall etching process, as an example, on aluminum foil manufacturing, is a very high energy consumption process. You're probably not going to see a lot of price reductions in aluminum, or certainly polymer aluminum type products. A lot of labor, as Michael mentioned, also with cable assemblies and those types of things. Mm-hmm. The labor rate will continue to drive some price increases there. So labor and energy, I think, will continue to drive some price increases. But on the last comment there, I think one of the differences in price increases over the next 6 months, maybe to 18 months, is there'll be more series specific or product categories, limited product categories, as opposed to the kind of the wholesale nature or the entire price book at a certain, markup standard. Some of those markups were driven by, packaging. Some of it was driven by logistics. Some of it was, be honest, some of it was just opportunistic. And I think you'll see less and less of those types of price increases in the back half of 2023 and 24. And the price increases that you will see will be more specific to a product series or to a category of products. And then again, Mike mentioned also like copper content, could be gold, could be silver, could be ruthenium or palladium. There are high contents in some of the higher performance products in the capacitor resistor world. With the rare earth elements and some of the metals that are out there, you could see some price increases that are specifically connected to components that have a high content of those materials.
Wow, Jeff, very complete answer. We can stop there, Eric. We're all set. What I just wanted to touch on with you guys, though, is why and how we got here and kind of where we are. Are we just at the end of a massive bullwhip effect from a huge disruption? Do we still have disruption in terms of demand shifting things? What got us here, and where are we in the cycle? Are we waiting for more capacity to come on board? Jeff, you're nodding your head. Perhaps you can take that one first.
Well, I'll start there. So it's a great question. And so I think the process, at least as when I say jokingly, it's a painful joke, is our customers went from needing product, just in time, as the COVID era kind of extended. I think customers continue to try and advantage it. So it went from just in time to just in case. And the simple fact is now it's just too much. And so everybody, whether it's an OEM customer, an EMS customer, distributors alike, there's a huge overhang of inventory that's out there in the market today. So we went from not having hardly any product to now all of us having too much product. As Mike mentioned earlier, now there will be certain specific programs at certain customers where the gating factor or products that we're still escalating. Some lead times still are out there, but a general comment is there's just too much inventory in the overall channel today. And so we'll be working through that. I believe, and an optimistic view, that by the end of calendar Q3 2023, we may start to see a more direct linkage of the end customer forecast to the end customer actually consumption and inventory levels, and lead times kind of getting more in line. They certainly have not been aligned over the last couple of years. So I think that's probably the biggest change that we'll see coming out as we work through an over-inventoried position in the market.
Where are you guys on inventory, Michael? You managed to draw some cash out of inventory and work in progress and bring it down. And what do you see as the overhang risk?
Well, for us, what we're trying to do is leverage the lessons learned over the past few years or few months of the crisis to better inventory solutions with our customers. Right. Some of the things that we've learned over the past few months and past few years is what specific components working with our customers can shut them down easily. which ones are hard to get, which ones are more likely to go into an allocation than others, and work with them on creative replenishment solutions and things like safety stock programs, and partner with the TTIs of the world, for example, on how to set up creative solutions so that you have the Goldilocks amount, right? Not just in time and not just too much, but just right. I think that's where we're working to get to, and taking the experiences that we had with these customers and the types of products that we're buying with them, we're putting that to use and making recommendations to them.
Yeah.
Hey, how much of the in the areas of improvement, how much do you think that has to do with demand versus some increased supply on the production on the supplier side?
So I think you're going into the capacity question a little bit there, right?
Yeah.
So over the period of the crisis where we saw demand fall off a cliff and then shoot up like a rocket, the delayed reaction to that, the bullwhip effect.
Yeah.
The OEMs, the component manufacturers themselves, tried to ramp quickly to meet that extended capacity, but cautiously. In other words, they've been burned before and faked out and spent a bunch of money on CapEx for it to not sustain. This does feel a little different. One of the main contributors that we cite towards on the supply side is the digitization of everything. The common metric is there was X amount of chips in a car a few years ago, and now there's 10x or 100x, whatever. It's increased logarithmically. Mm-hmm. And I do think that there is some truth to that. Just look at the number of smart devices that you're using today versus 10 years ago, right? So I do think that the demand side of it is a little sticky. But yeah, there was that bullwhip effect, and we're finally at a point where we can start to sort out how much of that was the bullwhip and how much of that is real sustained organic growth. Now, the supply side, where the CapEx investments were made by these component manufacturers, a lot of that has come online, but the stuff that they initially invested in was really targeted towards the more cutting edge technology, the faster, higher capacity memory devices that we talked about, the smaller node size semiconductor devices, the things that are often used in telecom and compute, where we've seen the greatest reduction in lead time recently and the greatest pullback in cost or pricing offered by those companies. The pockets of constraint are mostly tied to the older technologies, the things that have longer product life cycles, things in medical or aerospace, for example, where you have the same aircraft flying around for 20 or 30 years. That chipset that's used on some of those avionics, if it's even still in production, maybe what lifetime buy wasn't done, but if it's even still in production, it's being built on very old equipment that's tooled for something you wouldn't have a need to produce more of today, right? So there hasn't been additional capacity, or at least not really, in a lot of those areas. That's why we still see that pocketed constraint phenomena occurring.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, what do you have to add to that?
So you painted a very accurate picture. What I would add to it is what I'm calling kind of the copy paste function from component engineering. And what has happened, as Mike just discussed, is we've got some pretty old drawings out there and bills of materials. And while the products themselves they're not end of life or obsolete, they're not exactly the newer, more readily available products. And as component manufacturers look for CapEx, they're not typically trying to expand their facility, right, get the equipment in, train operators and inspectors to build more legacy product. And so where we've seen customers moving more is, instead of managing, kind of the part number, they're asking us to manage the category or the commodity for them. What that allows us to do is it allows us to point them from a movement code standpoint more towards standard items that are more readily available. I can't tell you how many times we've been in escalation calls over the last couple of years when they're expediting a very specific product, and we would have 6 or 8 or 10 of the exact same flavors in the warehouse, but those products weren't on the approved bill of material, and it would take more effort to qualify that product, add it to the bill of material, than it would to kind of elbow your way to the front of the escalation line. And so what we're seeing customers doing is being more open to the A, B, and C kind of movement code standard products for those builds and moving away from the customer specific NCNR types of products, which reduces their liability and actually aligns themselves better with the additional capacity that has been brought online over the last few years.
It's really interesting, Jeff, and it talks a little bit to what Michael was saying about lessons learned and how, how you've moved out of this firefighting position and you're in an opportunity to improve things. When you look at that, Michael, is it a question of having better tools that create better visibility? So is digital transformation part of that process? And how has this crisis change your relationship in terms of inventory on both the customer side and on the supplier side?
Yeah, so on the tools piece, it's given us the motivation to tool up a little bit better. Mm-hmm. We've actually integrated some of the tools we were using to understand product life cycles and component availability a little bit better into some of the ERP planning software that we have to get more real-time visibility versus uploading a BOM into a database and looking at reports. That's certainly sped it up quite a bit. I mentioned we're talking with partnerships we have with a lot of the franchise distributors or component manufacturers themselves around giving them better visibility into what our future demand is and setting up strategic safety stock programs with customers. We also have some third-party partners we're working with in alignment with our customers on things like that. At the end of his answer there, Jeff mentioned one thing I wanted to plug was another symptom of the problem we saw was during the crisis was the NCNR terms, not cancelable, not non-returnable terms that nearly all electronic components had for a very long time over the 2-year period we just went through. We're finally seeing a bit of a pullback on that policy. A number of OEMs have announced that they're rescinding that at some point in the near future or effective immediately. That gives us a big sigh of relief because it gives you back that lever you can pull from a planning perspective to push out or cancel or return if necessary. A lot of if the demand that you had was perishable and you were dealing with long lead times, it creates a very uncomfortable situation with customers at that point because you have a lot of parts that can't be built out, or maybe you don't even have them yet, but once you do, they're going to have to work that out with you. So relief from those NCNR terms makes it more comfortable, I think, for everybody, especially when it's NCNR and like 52-week leads. If it's NCNR and 12 weeks, you can plan for that and you have more confidence in your forecast. But when it's a year plus out, I don't know what I'm doing next year. Do you?
Yeah,
when
exactly.
are you taking vacation next year? Right? Like it's difficult. So and in the business world, it's even more difficult because a year is an eternity.
Yeah.
Good. Hey, talking about the delivery side, let's touch on logistics for a bit too, because Phil and I did a recent interview or show when we had the CEO of another global EMS on, and he referred to it as kind of the perfect storm when COVID hit. It hit materials and it hit COVID, right? He says, we've never had them at the same time, kind of in such,
logistics. Yeah.
Just kind of how messed up that was. So how is it going these days? How are you saying, is the logistical side improving or the cost getting better? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I guess that's for me. Yeah, we've seen the market really open up on the logistics side across all markets, particularly on ocean freight. That certainly improved a lot, but yeah, the costs have come down. But what I don't understand is the airlines are struggling with passenger capacity. They can move goods around without too much trouble and for a very affordable price. So yeah. we have seen improvement there, and that is a benefit to our customers and the industry as a whole. That's one highlight. I wish we could say the same across the board on some of the materials we're talking about. But I think we're getting there. It's just being seen a little bit more slowly.
How close is freight pricing back to compared to what it was? It went up to, I don't know, a 5x multiple. Is it
depending on the freight,
1x or is it down to 2x?
Yeah, depending on the freight and the method you're going and the geographies you're transitioning in between, it might even be less. Like I've quoted some things from Asia to West Coast US recently on ocean freight, and we've seen substantial decreases. It was actually less expensive than going by truck from Mexico, which was interesting to me.
Wow.
We were doing some kind of what if scenario planning of as far as where you manufacture something. We do that often to help customers understand true landed costs and when they make decisions around what geography they want to manufacture in. And one anomaly I saw was ocean freight was significantly lower than we expected. And that's not the case for everybody. It's a very custom question, right? Because when you talk about freight, there's dimensions, there's volume, there's weight, there's destinations, tariffs, and a lot of things kind of play into that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeff, anything on logistics?
Well, so I agree with what Mike just said. One thing I would add is we've also seen things like corrugated materials going back to pre-COVID pricing. So along with the packaging itself, many of the manufacturers that we import products from, particularly in Southeast Asia, the Philippines, were almost exclusively air prior to. And with a lack of commercial flights, everything went to ocean at seemingly higher prices than previously the air freight were. So those things are back into shape, if you will, and in some cases, as Mike pointed out, a little bit actually reduced. I would say that the challenges overall that have been associated with packaging and freight have really, we're back to at or pre-COVID levels on those issues.
Wow. It's fascinating to hear you two speak of the crisis so much in the past tense, and it's quite cheering to do that. One of the things that was a side effect of the shortages was an increase in counterfeit. Have we seen a normalization in that as well? Are you seeing much better results? Obviously, part of the issue was the channels that you were having to go to, and that was part of the issue. Where do you see that counterfeit or aged out components or damaged components side of things from your point of view? Michael, how do you see that on a goods inward inspection basis?
Yeah, so we've always had very strong controls on counterfeit material, even through the pandemic, because benchmark services such a large portion of our business in highly regulated markets like aerospace and defense and medical. Counterfeit parts can mean lives, right? So we've always had very strong controls in that area. And what I think was a cause for concern during the pandemic was the increase in broker buys, just due to general material availability. The markets I just mentioned were still quite reluctant through the COVID crisis to go to the broker market. We didn't see it that often. And where we did, we would often do, or almost all the time do, some type of third-party component testing to get some surety, to get some sense of what you're buying is good goods. But it was very common in other areas that are not perhaps as highly regulated, more aimed towards the consumer side. And yeah, as your use of brokers increase, we expect counterfeit part detection to kind of be a function of that to some extent. I wouldn't say it was significant or any type of negative impact to our overall operation, but we do find it sometimes. There are some very good fakes, and the reduction that we see going forward now with going to the broker market, due to stabilizing lead times and better supplied component markets overall, I think with that we'll see a significant reduction in the occurrence of counterfeit parts.
Yeah. So when you look at the normal channels through component distribution and component distributors buying direct from the component manufacturers, you feel there's a supply chain there that doesn't require that zero trust, high level of inspection approach.
Well, I think you always need it. You always need some degree of it. For example, you want to be doing business with the same types of brokers. You want to have audited their processes, make sure that they do what they say that they do, that they have some types of controls on their end. But your customers are going to be more willing to buy into that type of thing if they're selling tablets or speaker phones versus something that somebody's life is going to depend on. A lot of times it's just not going to come into the conversations in those areas, but you do need to have the process in place to screen those types of things if it does. So I think we've been pretty shielded from it because of that. Jeff may have other customers that maybe weren't so lucky, but we're thankful to see that the broker buys are going down, and our customers are too, because with the negative of potential counterfeit parts, they're also very expensive. So it's nothing worse than buying something counterfeit and finding out it's fake.
Yeah, those guys have been riding a roller coaster though, haven't they?
Yeah.
Jeff, what's your thought on that?
So here at TTI, we focus on a few verticals, certainly the military aerospace, transportation, medical, and high-end industrial, and the EMS customers that support those verticals. So as such, safety and reliability is paramount in our overall processes. We only buy product from the authorized distributors, authorized manufacturers that we are a distributor for. That shields us significantly from the challenges. That doesn't necessarily remove it, because there are products that find their way back through stock rotations or general inventory management processes back in even to the manufacturers. As Michael pointed out, the broker market's been pretty prevalent over the last couple of years. And so you'd have to think that there is an increase of products, particularly as products were constrained. As that lessens, I believe the overall space that a counterfilter would be able to participate in would also be reduced. Clearly not eliminated, but it would be reduced somewhat. But it's a huge challenge. You're right that there are some opportunistic folks that are out there. We do everything that we can to mitigate those risks and insulate our customers, particularly in the verticals that we concentrate on. I do agree with what Mike said. If you're in the handheld, ultra portable consumer market, and the component's goal is to last longer than the stated 6-month warranty, you're probably a little bit less concerned about it. But when you get into the safety and reliability verticals that we concentrate on, that could be a very, very significant problem.
Okay.
Hey, one of the big topics in the industry, especially this year, my God, even in life, is AI and how it's becoming so prevalent in everything, right? We'll keep ChatGPT to the side for this discussion, but but a lot of the tools are and have been incorporating that, right? The solutions that you have. What's your opinion of that? How big of a difference is that making in making things better for you?
Maybe I'll jump in first on this one. So certainly from an IT standpoint, a digital enablement, that is one of the things that, or an area that we spent a lot of time over the last couple of years, and will continue to spend time and CapEx expansion in this area, really trying to better understand the true market demand that's out there from a product standpoint. So there's tons of ways that the AI will be able to help us in our overall business, but from a product standpoint, no singular better way to understand what the true market demand is. I think that's where a lot of the inventory overhang came from, is a little bit of exuberance out there in the overall market. And we'll be implementing some tools, standardizing some processes, removing some things, being able to collect all of that data and having it available at the inside sales desk and customer service levels, where we can make better decisions to support the customer and also in our asset management decisions.
There's such a huge amount of data. AI is really the only way to manage it. What about you, Michael?
Yeah, when I think about AI in terms of this discussion, kind of two components of it. One, I think the investor side, I think you see a lot of speculation right now with a lot of the component manufacturers, investors betting that AI is going to be a huge demand increase on their products. And yeah, I suppose that's possible. To what extent, I don't know. It's kind of early to tell. We're still kind of understanding the applications of AI and where it can be used. To your point, Eric, I think it's going to be beyond just Chat GPT. Getting a couple clever answers that make you laugh. There's some real powerful applications you can put it to. In our business, what I think about, the most obvious one is some sort of ERP management, right? And AI is going to kind of happen in two stages or come in two flavors. It's going to either be able to make recommendations or suggestions on transactions that you can do, and eventually that'll mature into it being sentient, it actually making decisions, it determining what to push out, what to pull in, what to cancel based on the monitoring of certain inputs, right? I don't think we're that far away from that. We're already at the point where it can make suggestions. Any decent ERP system is worth its salt is gonna be able to produce those types of messages to the buyers. But the point at where we start allowing it to make decisions, it's a lot of anxiety there, right? That's people's jobs. It's also a great productivity tool, and it could potentially revolutionize the industry and really help stabilize supply chains, which is good for everybody and probably creates jobs elsewhere. So it's an exciting thing to watch. I'm kind of a spectator in that. I'm not a very good computer programmer, but I'm very interested to see where the trend takes us, and the demand side too. Does it create a significant draw on the electronic components that impacts others? That kind of remains to be seen.
Yeah. I think what's fascinating, and you don't need to be a good programmer, Michael, because ChatGPT can program. So you just need to tell it what to program. Yeah,
you'll have me program
that. But I think the question that you were talking about in terms of recommendations and decision making is the classic AI question, which is pilot, co-pilot. At the moment, I think the opportunity for it to be an intelligent co-pilot that's processed a huge amount of data and can offer you suggestions or ideas of ways that you can solve specific problems is great. I think it's a big step for it to get to the stage where it says, hey, we're not even going to ask Michael, we're just going to do this stuff. So there's a duty of care required between those two stages. One quick question that I wanted to ask, and I'm conscious that we haven't got much time, so short answer. Huge question, short answer. Geopolitics, supply chain geography, obviously stuff like the CHIPS Act, the IRA, all kinds of other incentives in various parts of the world are trying to shift the geography of the supply chain. That's a very, very long process, I'm guessing. Are you seeing any immediate or short-term impacts, and kind of how do you feel about that process? Michael, perhaps from a buyer's point of view, you can tackle that one first.
Well, I was just in Mexico last week, and it was very busy. I don't just mean the traffic. I had the chance to kind of walk through some suppliers that we're working with down there, and I saw a lot of construction. I saw a lot of new fancy equipment. I saw the most capability I've probably seen under one roof in a machine shop ever. All new equipment, and they can't buy it and install it fast enough. The reshoring trend and trying to get low cost here in the Americas is very real. It's very strong. It's one of the main things my customers ask me for when I sit down with them. So a tremendous amount of activity there. And to your point, it's not a fast process. Especially when it involves construction or significant capital investment. So it is going to take a few years as it plays out. But generally, what we see is a really strong desire to localize supply chains, be closer to home, and have a less energy intensive, smaller supply chain that goes through less steps, less hands, less geography, and is easier to manage. And when there's a problem, you can get there today, right?
Yeah.
That's the general trend. And a lot of things have enabled that. We probably don't have enough time to go too deep into it here, Phil. But that trend continues probably for the rest of this year and certainly into 2024.
Yeah, shorter supply chains. Good for the planet, I think. Jeff, what do you see?
So quick answer is suppliers are moving from a globalization standpoint to more regionalization. So we're starting to see manufacturers putting in facilities within region. As Michael just mentioned, a lot of that in the Americas is coming into Mexico. In Asia, the manufacturing facilities that are in China are pretty much for China, and what's going to service the greater Asian market are moving into South Asia, particularly into Vietnam and into Thailand and Malaysia and other countries in South China. I think that, overall, the questions that we're continuing to receive about country of origin, we will continue to see customers be very aware and working away from country of origin, China, with products. And certainly it would be very, very difficult, but there's certainly been a concerted effort to move away from that.
Hey, there you go, Eric. We've been talking about regionalization for 15 years. I knew eventually we'd be right.
Well, we were in skinny ties again too, but
you just got to wait it out.
One follow-on thought there, though, Phil. I mean, it's busy and it's crowded, and I've even had some customers come to me because they had bad experiences elsewhere, because it is so busy and so crowded, and they want to go back to Asia because I don't want to discount that. There are very capable supply chains there, and there is very good quality, and they can do a very good job with the product. So again, it's an individual decision that really depends on your markets and your products. And one advantage right now to going to Asia is you're kind of avoiding the crowds right now. Everybody is planning to get some floor space in Mexico, so there's certainly an advantage there if you have some type of timeline you're working to.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right, Michael. We did a show with a couple of guys talking about Southeast Asia. And I think there's an old way of thinking, which is chasing low-cost labor around the world. And we've done that for a considerable amount of time, and it's done some damage to the supply chain. And there's a new way of thinking where, you've got to have manufacturing in China because there's a huge consumer market in China. You've got to have manufacturing in Southeast Asia because there are 700 million people there that are growing in terms of their consumer spend as well. And you've got to have those low-cost options in the Americas, those lower-cost options in Eastern Europe. But it just seems a lot more pragmatic than saying, hey, this one country is the next big thing. Let's all go there. I don't see that happening. So I think there's a correction there, whether we call it regionalization, reshoring, ally shoring, friend shoring. There are so many different terms, but if the end result is shorter, more robust, and hopefully more agile supply chains, then that's a good thing for everybody, I think.
No, very well said. Listen, we need to wrap it, but I always like to end with allowing you guys to get your crystal ball out and offer a little view ahead for the audience. So as we look forward, and you've touched on it, both of you, on a couple of points already about things that might be here through 2023 into 2024. But if we think about, the rest of this year, how do you see things as far as the material supply chain, the constraints or the opportunities there? What does your crystal ball say? Jeff, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I would just, single word, I'll just say choppy. So the back half of this year, it will be choppy. I think overall we're in a good space. We're in a good market. There's tons of things that are positive indicators, but we do still have a little bit of a choppiness to in customer demand, inventory levels, and the manufacturing capacity. A little bit of alignment issues that will just remain choppy throughout the back half of the year.
Okay. So choppy is small waves, not big waves?
Well, as Michael's pointed out a couple of times, it depends on the product and the customer. Hopefully they'll all be ripples and no things that we would categorize as white caps. But it will be choppy.
Yeah. Very similar. Yeah, I was talking about the pockets of constraint here on some of the, maybe call it the legacy type technology. Yeah, certainly continue to see some of that between now through the end of the year. Little by little, we're seeing improvement. Again, I'll point back to what I started with at the beginning of this conversation. Stability is the theme that's emerging in terms of lead times and overall price. It varies depending as you go a little deeper into the category types. But the fact that we're getting stable lead times allows us to plan better. It allows us to run a tighter operation, and that'll only get better as those lead times come back to, or at least get closer to the pre-pandemic level. Right, we still have a lot of 52-week lead components out there, which is a long time. Again, the relaxation of NCNR helps, especially on long lead components. So what I would say is as we see a much stronger supply chain towards the end of 23 going into 24, but we're going to have some bumps in the road along the way.
Very good. Jeff, Mike, thank you very much. This has been excellent. You've certainly given me a few things to think about here, and I appreciate that. But thank you. This has been great insight. I'm sure the audience will appreciate it, and hopefully we can catch up with you both in the future again.